I'm very interested to know more about how in your practice what is the role of the mind when you actually use language while moving as well.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe this internal operation?
I've been working for a few years diligently. Trying to understand mind is not within my head. Mind is also a body that relates to the physical body. And it reaches out beyond the physical body. And I believe it reaches into the matrix. So that consciousness is a matrix. And so picking up things from beyond the physical form are part of mind. Yeah.
So if you would stop speaking while moving, would you say that the body is still talking, although it's not throwing words in the space?
I think the body's still processing, and if processing articulates into language internalized as an internal thought or a dialogue in internal, let's say, hearing things like move left, follow the shoulder. Those things would be non-voiced, but still present.
And do they contain ideas as well? An arm moving contains ideas or expresses ideas?
I think it could express ideas, or it could express a wish to source an idea, find sense to an idea.
And how another person could understand such an idea? Is enough to look at that arm moving, or should be in touch with the arm? I'm curious about, if we're talking about arm, I'm curious about the gesture of arm, and not just as a decorative, let's say, appendage to a moving body, but that a lot of gesture is universal across culture. So a palm open is different from, let me get there, this. Did I answer your question? I didn't answer your question. Shall I try again? Does the arm have an idea? Restate the question. If expresses or communicates ideas. Because when we speak, we believe we do.
Oh, okay.
But I wonder if we shut up, are we still communicating ideas? Simply by moving?
I would love to research that, in fact. I wonder if there are signals or symbols that, if it's the intention of the mover, to articulate an idea through an arm or arm gesture, that would need to be researched. Or I'm also curious if there are universal arm gestures that, without making people understand your idea, but rather opening a portal for them to fill it in themselves.
And in your practice, what communicates ideas mainly in your practice?
I'm hoping that it is a body-based practice, and how it's relating to whether it's object or other or space.
So
simply put. So I'm not trying...
In which body parts do you rely to communicate ideas?
I've been working a lot lately with the visual field. So eye and sensory perception of the visual field through a felt sense. Sorry, I just got my other hand in there. Through a felt sense rather than a classic performative. I'm going to look at you and expect you to look back at me. Yeah, so I've been working a lot with that question through the visual field perception, also allowing you to see me.
In which way is your practice intellectual? How do you relate to this term of intellectual? And in addition to that double question, do you feel sometimes that the field of dance sometimes has to fight for being understood as also an intellectual practice, or that otherwise it's seen as something only disconnected to brain activity?
Well, it's interesting. I have a history of working with craniosacral therapy from the mid-90s when it was called hippie stuff. But I went on a bit of a mission to find empirical language to justify sensorial experiences I was having. So to intellectualize or to put empirical language to sensorial things that are happening was a sort of self-defense way of defending things I was sensing. Yeah, so I find that kind of interesting. And part of that had to do with which brain lobes were active during a practice. So with my work, I like to engage the parietal lobes of the brain, which are behind the ears and above, that are involved in the sensorial processing of the present, and not in the frontal lobes, which is the didactic, right, wrong, yes, no, I've got it, I don't got it, I don't know what I'm doing, this is stupid, I love this, like attachment stuff. I hope I answered the double question.
Sure.
So the field of dance and how it needs to justify itself on an intellectual level. I think that's really happening, and I think it's not a bad thing, especially in an age where the digital wants to replace the human form, and we are incredible. And in fact, if we could articulate, it may make some bridges, developing some bridges with not just the dance field, but the people who we'd like to share that practice with. Sorry. It doesn't have to be intellectualized.
So your practice could exist also without voicing out?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And do you think it will be as accessible as it is? Because there's a big difference when somebody's watching you moving. If you are describing what you do or not. Sometimes it could be understood as a way of facilitating the viewer to have a better idea of what you are doing. Otherwise, it could be cryptic. So, do you also provide, or does the voicing out has the function also of giving access to the viewer to what you do, making it more accessible?
I'm wondering if it's more accessible to their own body. So my wish for a long time was not just to show off my virtuosic moves, but was to, I thought at some point, wow, what if someone sitting out there had an experience that I'm having out here doing it in a way that brought them into contact, which was dance. So like when you're dancing with someone, there's a bit of a magic thing, really, like tango that happens, or could happen, or this multi-sensory experience that sure there's some movements that you've rehearsed and done, and then suddenly you're in a live event. I think the audience is part of the live event, but then I also feel, gosh, if they only had a sense of what we were doing in a way that was not just a visual eye candy. So, yeah. Part of the dialoguing was in a way to bring people in through my experience into their own experience, as a way to share the practice beyond just I'm here doing this and you're there watching.
If we don't limit the mind to the production of thoughts, how would you describe these other processes that the mind is engaged and has nothing to do with being thoughtful?
Thoughtful.
What is the mindfulness that is not thoughtful?
Mindfulness, not thoughtful. Okay. So I think about the root of the language, mind. So to mind your manners, mind yourself, which means to be aware of yourself, take action. So expanding awareness is what I understand, or mind the gap, or child minding, which is not just babysitting, but it's a language still used. So to be a minder is to be a guardian. So thinkers, I think the language of great thinkers had to do maybe more with scientists, empirical scientists, as well as philosophers, how to process. I think what they were doing is processing their experiences and their daydreams and creating a thought structure to support it. And mindfulness is quite an overused word, but I think the intention is quite beautiful. It's in an attempt to bring to the general public an orientation to awareness of self and other. And self is not the ego, and self is not only the body, and self is not just your thoughts.
So which are those functions of the mind that are not thinking? How would you list them?
I believe there's consciousness. I believe there's subconsciousness, and I use the language non-consciousness because I don't actually believe we're ever unconscious. So unconscious would mean dead, essentially. So non-conscious could mean a big gray zone or a blacking out, but you're still conscious. I am pretty certain that in the dream world, as you're dreaming, the conscious mind is resting and giving space for the subconscious and possibly non-conscious to come into field of view or experience through dreaming. I was convinced for a while, but I'm not going to spend any time proving it, that we're still available to the subconscious while we're conscious. If we quiet the thinking thought mind.
And specifically speaking about your practice, in which way is your practice mindful and not thoughtful?
Because I believe the mind is not just in the brain or in the head, and it's an ability to be in a multi-perceptual awareness of the physical body and the feeling body, and letting go of a mind, like a thought-controlled task.
And do we usually locate or associate intellectual with brain and not mind? Or is also the mindful operations also intellectual?
I get confused by the use of language. I'm not sure. We say there are great thinkers in the world, but are there great minders?
There we go.
If they talk about if we go into some philosophies coming from Buddhist practices, where consciousness is a process in order to become more one with self and other, they are perhaps great minds. Or that language in English we say great minds think alike, which actually doesn't mean you think alike, it's that you're both interested in the same things. Great minds think alike.